always more behavioral issues outside of the yard. There was some days that there was not windy. So I wonder if you had some insight on that.
I definitely could give you some insight on that. I just learned this week that there's a spot right here in the back of your head, right? Where in the Chinese, and I just saw this one little video, I haven't done research, so forgive me if I get some of this wrong, but there's a wind spot here. And what happens is this spot gets agitated if you have energy tossed at you and other stuff. So it might be good to create this exercise where you could teach them about their wind spots and then use it as a little tool to maybe calm them down. The other thing is I'm getting ready to teach a 7-week shift network class that begins in a week. And I created the WindWork field guide. And as I was doing it, there were so many exercises in here that we were thinking like, oh, this needs to be adapted for kids. So once they understand it, what I did was I took it, this is my sales pitch since we haven't started yet, but in this field journal that I created, you do an internal exercise, but then you take it to the external. So like there's like wind field studies in here, like to actually go out and watch how the wind is moving so that you start to have that relationship with it, and then it shifts how you perceive it. Because what most people don't understand is that Holy Spirit, wind, ruach, wind, nirvana, no wind, om, the sound of wind passing through things. So for eons, we didn't know that Holy Spirit, the invisible, what you can't see, more powerful than you, is wind. And I have a story, and this isn't exactly in the part of the talk per se, but the 15,000 years ago, we moved from the outside in. And what we did was we constructed buildings, and they had what in Old English was called wind eyes. And so from now we were looking out at the wind. And at the same time, by chance, we created intermediaries to help us understand what Spirit was telling us. So here now we are, 15,000 years later, disconnected, being blown apart, buffeted by the wind, because we don't have a relationship with it. Does that make, it's that simple. Like today at breakfast, there was so much clatter, and you know how these conferences are, everyone's trying to sell you something or pitch their ideas, whatever. It's great, because we don't always have these opportunities. But I could feel this frenetic energy in this hotel. I stepped out the door, it expanded, that energy was gone, and it was like, wow, nature, 2 seconds in nature. Just 2 seconds, not even 10 minutes. But we're looking at our evolution from our wind eyes, and we need to open up those windows. Will somebody tell me when I'm supposed to start? It's 3, okay. All right, should I introduce, I'm supposed to introduce, you can close the door if you want. So just so if you want to know if you're in the right room or not. My name is Renee Baribeau, and I'm known as the Practical Shaman. Now, the Practical Shaman is a redundant thing because all shamans were concerned with their community, their sustainability, the health of their animals and livestock. So saying you're the Practical Shaman is like saying practical. But what makes it shaman and not just practical is the magical experiences I've had along the way, the initiations, umpteen years of training. I've written several books. God, I can't even believe I can say that. I've written several books, and I have a new one at the publisher called The Practical Shaman, and that's the working name. I've created a WindWork field guide, which I created because I'm teaching a shift network class that starts next Tuesday, and it's about the wind. So if you get called for this work, come talk to me, and there's some cards over there. This book is Winds of Spirit. How many people know about this book before today? A couple of you. It's a Hay House book, and they published it because they said, oh, no one's ever written that book. But what I didn't know when I thought I was going to be famous, all the Hay House stages and everything, but that story I told some of you before about going on the bluff and they're telling me I'm going to write a book about the wind, nobody knew for the wind. We forgot about the wind, 15,000 years, and so it's taken me 10 years to get wind believers and to get people who say, this is magic and it works. And so that's happened. Two years ago, I had this story. This man called me that I had gone to shaman school with 20 some years ago, and yeah, that was the thing, shaman school. Those were not the initiations. That was what I had to do to make myself secure that the initiations happened were something that I could find useful. I was going to walk the Camino, and this man said to me, could you walk for me? And I didn't know, like, how am I going to walk for this guy? Every day I'd get out on the trail before I started, because usually by the time I got to the hotel, I was too tired to tell anyone anything. Who's walked it? Anyone here? You get to the end of the day and you're just like hoping your legs don't fall off. There was a hard walk, and so I did it at the beginning of the day, and I said, wow, those are really interesting insights. And I wrote them down. And then I'm there like, wow, I did all of these videos and people were following me all over the trail. Never heard again from Don. It turns out he had sent me Sonia Choquette's book, Walking Home, which I read. And what I didn't know was he died the day I started to walk. And I walked him home. And I just got chills when I say that. And so I dedicated this book to Don. I've been really aware lately about, it started with Don actually. It started that story about how this idea of awakening is a facade. First of all, how are you feeling about awakening now that we've made awake a bad term? So I like stand around them, they're like, oh, can I even say awake? A couple of years ago, I thought for me awake was when I was 30, 90% of the time I was depressed. In my 50s, I was 60%, and when I got to 60, and a doctor once told me, when you hit menopause, Renee, you don't give a shit anymore. And then everything goes away anyway. So now I don't even know if I was awake or if the doctor at 22 who told me I had all of these diagnoses were correct. Either way, in my 60s, I was floating along thinking, please as punch as am I. I did all this work and look at how great life is. And I was standing at the Painfield Airport on Christmas Eve, and I get a phone call. Oh, I hate to tell you this, but my brother died in your house today, Christmas Eve, and I was the next tenant. If you ever want to know just how awake you are, look at when you're feeling overwhelmed, somebody dies in your life, all of those places will be really telling you about the nature of your spiritual condition. I froze and I thought, wow, this awake thing is lip service. It's just really a lot of lip service. There's quite a few older people here, so we were sitting around in circles 30 years ago, and now all of a sudden the wind's buffeting us. We're like, what happened to all those skills we learned? They go out the window when you open your email in the morning and you're scrolling the New York Times or the Far Out Times, or I had this thing with my editor. She said, I either thought you were stupid or you don't read the news. I said, maybe I'm getting different news. I read from far right to far left. I'm trying to find the truth. How many other people here are like wondering what is true anymore? That's what got me to this talk. We're being corralled around to believe this thing or that thing is true, when really, when I went out this morning and left the hotel and I got that nice breeze and I was out there with nature and the hawk showed up, I thought, oh, there's my messenger. Or the snake that is known for transformation, there's my messenger. Or meeting the nice young man who was out bird watching, and I go, I saw a hawk. He goes, oh, I wanted to see a hawk. I'm there like, here, I'll share my picture with you. You can tell your friends you saw the hawk. Because when we're aligned with nature, It tells us all of the information we could possibly need or use in any day. I know that's true because otherwise, why would they take the wind and make it Holy Spirit? Why would they take the wind and make it ruach? Or take the wind and make it nirvana, which is no wind? So I'm telling you here that you can go to Source and get all the information that you need in your day just as easy as leaving the hotel and walking up that nice path that they have. We've just gotten so far away from that because if we really look at our lives, we get the information that we need every single day. So how many of you are suffering from some loss? Too much information. That's a lot of us, right? If you dig down deep, you just don't even know what's real. If I read something in the newspaper or hear something, I did a reset this year where I started out where there was no reading the newspaper in the morning. My life changed quickly. Who starts the morning with the news? Only one of you? Two of you. Oh, come on, get honest. A couple more of you. All right, I'm really happy that most of you don't. We were taught about intuition. We were taught about staying open. We were taught about looking for the signs. But we weren't taught about boundaries, discernment, and how to decipher the truth. Think about it. We spent all of those years learning how to open our intuition. I used to always say, oh, but what color glasses are you looking at that information from? And I think that we have to be really aware of our own biases and how we're perceiving things, what we're looking at through our own biased lens. A couple weeks ago, I had this dream, and there was a psychiatrist and another therapist on the bench in front of me, and this is what they said. Renee, you've done enough work. I was like, yeah, I like that. Now it's time to go deeper. And I think for so many of us, what does that deeper look like? For me, I'm teaching a new course next week that's really about refathering. We wanted to heal the masculine, we wanted to have divine feminine, but we haven't looked at the broken masculine. And where that really reflected for me a lot was that I don't respect the office of presidency. How did I get so I could not respecting the office? Forget the person, but that I don't necessarily think that the office is having my respect. And I think I was working for behavioral health for the last 6 years and I didn't respect my boss. And I started to look at that has to do with something off in me. Something that doesn't go, and there's the difference between being able to discern the truth, but making up my own story that has lost respect for things. And I think that's a real thing that we're having. So that's why I developed this whole idea around this, like I think the psychiatrist in my dream did, about what refathering, what reparenting ourselves are. And so I went to Ancestry.com recently, and I was looking at the people that I put in the highest esteem was my father's side. When my grandmother taught me how to lie, we had a fruit stand and we used to sell corn, but we had one row of corn growing in the back alley. And I would say, oh yeah, we picked all that this morning, because that's what I was told. So this was how I built my idea, and I revered this. Then I thought, wow, there's this whole other side I haven't even looked at. So it's about time that we ask the deeper questions of what's still informing us, what's not in alignment with being able to really discern what's going on in nature. And there are still our own internal blocks. So this talk was about to move from the seeker to our own inner elder. And the seeker, there's the inner child that, and I think most of us got through that inner child work, hopefully, although look at it comes back around years ago. Then there's the seeker. How many classes can I take? How much this? How much information? All of that. That was that. But then we're moving into the inner elder. And that's the one that can track, discern, has boundaries, and then can make an informed decision, not based on what somebody else is telling you, but based on, for me, it's the WindWalk I take. So WindWalk is where you go out the door, you ask the wind a question, you wait until the wind kisses you on the cheek, and then you walk. Doesn't that like just sound that's a great one you could teach the kids, is to start to go to the wind for answers. But why do we lose our inner authority? We were seeking approval. We wanted information. I love David White's poem, "This is not the age of information. People are hungry for loaves and fishes." We're hungry. We're hungry for getting that information ourselves. And because we're not connected, we're seeking for it in all different ways. I wanted to give you an experience of what this looks like. Because this inner authority comes from orientating. How do you orientate? If you're not getting the results you want in your life, it might not have anything to do with you. You just might be standing in the wrong wind. You might need to pivot about 15 degrees this way or 15 degrees that way. And sometimes we have to pivot backwards in order to say, oh, I didn't really finish that, so that I can face this wind and then turn the other way. But I want you to hear this. Close your eyes, plant your feet. Breathe out. You remember that sound? You remember that wind? Let's see if we can get the wind to give you a little information. So I thought I would try this experiment. What we'll do is, I was traveling light, so I brought my rattle. And I always ask for people to hear this to make sure it's okay with you, because when I was working in a treatment center and newly sober people, and we had some people had mental health as well as addiction, and one time I just played the rattle and it really stirred up somebody. I always give people a little sound of it. So if you're working with an instrument, you might just always want to test it out to make sure that it doesn't. I really disturbed this young man, and I learned. So I'm going to do a little rattling to bring you present. And that's really important, because one time I was in this hotel and it had hundreds of people, and the man started to rattle, and I went into this spontaneous dismemberment where I was totally cut apart. And then my friends were sitting on both sides of me, and he was talking about long distance healing of all things at the front of the room. And here I was being dismantled, and then I was sewn shut with arrows, and literally my friends had to carry me from the room. They put me in bed, and I stayed in that bed for 3 days, but the spaceship came in one of my dreams, and I'm really earthbound, but the spaceship happened to come that time, took me for a ride to this garden where I was interviewed for the job, which I got. And I didn't know what it was for years until I have a podcast with Sandra Ingerman. And one time I told this story, she goes, oh, there was your shamanic initiation. And I had never owned it until that moment. And it was like 25 years later. And so that's what people say, how do you call yourself a shaman? And they're like, I didn't, happened to me one day. And so the rattle, if you have an experience with the rattle, just know, I'm not gonna be playing it for as long as he did, but I don't think he was playing it for the whole time I just went. And then I have a WindWalker Wisdom Oracle deck. There's 64 winds in here, and the winds in the deck, they come from all around the world because the winds assured me that the wind was on the planet first. If you go back to every creation story, there is a story about the wind and how the wind moved creation into form. They're not appropriating anything from anywhere around the world. What it is was the wind was there first, and the people up in Finland needed to hear from one wind. The people in South America had to hear from another wind, all the way around. And the winds are here to show us right now at this time. They come, the last time they were really this present was about 15,000 years ago. And since we're at the end of an epoch, we need the wind again. We need to understand, we need to form relationships with it. So I'm gonna rattle, I'm gonna blow the wind whistle, and then I'm gonna pull a wind walker. Actually, I'll probably have one of you pull it because that's more fun. And then I'll blow the whistle again, and we'll see what the message is for you from this wind, and then we'll talk about it. How's that sound? Okay. Any questions on that before I start? Okay. Again, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. And we're going to rattle. We're going to clear all the energy of all the other speakers and of this room. And feel yourself grounded in nature. Imagine yourself in your favorite place. And if you have shoes on in that place, take them off in your mind's eye. And feel the earth beneath your feet. And then as a group, we're going to see any of the energy moving from us. And we're going to ask the wind to help us move it. So call upon the wind in your imagination. Anything you've been holding on, any fear, anything somebody else has told you to believe, let it go. Now look up at the sky in that mind. What's going on in the sky? Is it a sunny day, a bright day? And now I'm going to bring you back to the room so we can do the next part. I love it. We have somebody in the back flying in the wind. It's great. Mary Poppins blew in on an east wind and thumpity thump over the gate and then left on a west wind. Did you know the Bible, this is some of the research when I wrote that first book, has 23 instances of the east wind and only 3 instances of the west wind throughout the book. And something else I just recently learned, just getting you into this wind thing as I shuffle, is that, oh no, I forgot. Oh, must not have been something true. That's another thing. If you can't remember 2 minutes later, it must not have been true. What's that?
Gone with the wind.
Gone with that wind. You think about it. That's how I started. At first, when I got this information, I thought, oh, I'm writing a book for my coaching clients. that, you know, and wind is a great metaphor. Do you know the word windfall? The windfall came about because the peasants in northern England, after a major windstorm, they would be allowed on the properties of these big estates to collect the wood, collect the fruit that had fallen, and it became the windfall. And so when we think about that, all of the words, all of the things we do are there in nature. They're right there for us. We just have to go pick the apple. And if you can't pick it up off the ground, and that's still good. But it's really important that we learn to do that right now. All right, who wants to pull a card for the group? You do. Yeah. This is a really interesting card. The wind people believe that you can't make this stuff up story after story. So here, what am I talking about? We're talking about truth and understanding what's true and not true. The card that she just pulled was Shu. And Shu is about separation. It's about the wind that separates the earth from the sky. And if not anything else, we're in this time of separation, but it's a wind story. It's a cycle story. I don't judge it bad or good or think like this is one thing or another. What I know is that we're at a time like in nature, cycles. The tree goes through its cycles and a branch falls and the tree rots. So we're at the rotting stage of our current epoch. But what we also know from like the fires in LA and other places, that what comes from the ground after total destruction is renewal. It's really not surprising that we have this wind of separation here when we're talking about how do we discern truth. My guess is the truth is somewhere in the middle between the earth and the sky, and in the middle. I'm going to play the wind whistle again for you, and I want you to think of this wind, Shu. We're going to call it to Shu. We're going to see what information Shu wants to give us today. The theme of it is ground yourself in nature. So that was why we just journeyed and grounded ourselves in nature, and that we have this idea. So like, what happens when we're grounded in nature? I'm going to invite you to close your eyes again. And we're going to call to Shu. Take a deep wind breath in. Ask yourself on this last wind breath, tell me something that is true for me today. And then when you're ready, come back here in the room. Anyone get any ideas of what might be true for them today that's a little bit different or a little bit off from something that you walked into the room thinking about, or something surprising?
I got the wind is your friend, but I find in Chinese medicine they say the wind steals your qi, especially if your neck is exposed. And so I read your book, but yet I have an aversion to going for my walks on windy days. So I'm just wondering how to reconcile those two things.
Did Shu give you an answer?
The answer was the wind is your friend.
So, come on. How many of you have friends that irritate you? How many partners irritate you? Just because it's an irritant doesn't mean it's not something that's valuable. I had one of my students who became my assistant for a few years. She hated the wind. And then there she is assisting me at Omega. And it turns out a couple years in, she figured out that when she was young, she had a dollar bill. And she was so proud of this dollar bill, she was holding it up as the cars driving down the highway, and the wind snatched her dollar bill. And she blamed it on the wind that she hated the rest of her life. Really, she should have closed the window if she wanted to examine that. So we like to do that. We have to really understand that in nature, one tree does not judge the tree next to it. They work in harmony to be and communicate with the things under the earth as well. And so I think that's important to remember, is that it's about not always liking it, but being able to live with it. That's that shift into the elder. Not the feeling, not the seeking, but understanding. Like when that man died in my house, it made me go deeper with my spiritual. That's how I was shocked. God, his spirit took off. There was no residue of him in my house, and I froze. I'd get up at night to go to the bathroom, and I'd look down the hall, and it'd say, somebody died there. I'm a shaman. I've done a lot of work, but all of a sudden, there was something so disruptive in my face, I had to grow. Anyone else have another insight, or did the wind tell you anything, or what you think of this wind whistle? Anything? Go ahead.
I'm meant to be here.
You're where?
I'm meant to be here.
Okay. Oh, you're front row and center, so I'm going to take that as a good sign. And look at, you got to be of service. You pulled the card for all of us, and look at how appropriate it was. We're talking about being able to discern truth in the middle of being separated. And that's not the only wind story about separation. Tyra Matea in New Zealand, Mama and Papa Rangi were so in love, and you might understand this story, they were so in love that they were collapsed. You know those people that are collapsed upon each other? And so the children inside were in this collapsed situation, and so the brother wind had to come in and separate them so that the rest of them could grow. How many times in your life has the wind come in to move something so there was spaciousness around it so that something else could happen? I got to see some head shaking. Anyone want to share? Yes?
We know each other, and I've heard you do this talk a couple times, and I thought it was interesting. I never realized that the wind is air. Air is 4 elements. A lot of us know astrology. Pluto just moved into an Aquarius age. Uranus is moving into Gemini, the other air sign. So a lot of what we're going through right now, just as a civilization, has to do with air. I never made the connection with wind and air until just now. And I've heard you do this talk.
Yay! I was waiting for the light bulb to go on in you. She keeps coming. She doesn't quite get it, but I know that. Come back.
But air also represents mental.
It is, and we've moved into the age of air. So it's one of the things I've known about my book here is that, and I didn't bring any books because I was traveling light. So all of my books you can either get on my website, thepracticalshaman.com, or on Amazon, and the Wind Oracle too. That I've been told, like you heard me, I wanted to be famous. I thought I wanted the big Hay House stages, and I'm funny, aren't I? I really can entertain. But the wind said to me, you better get humble, because this work is going to be around 100 years after you're dead. You're bringing this in for the next generation who are, remember, we've been in 15,000 years, so this work is going to be around, and I don't mean it to be, it's bigger than me and bigger than the people, and I'm thinking, like, why couldn't I have had something a little more insightful? Third eye opening, or, no, I got the wind. But it said, you're strong, you'll do the work. All right, we have about 10 minutes left, so I want you to get involved in this. And I want you, afterwards, you can come up and pull a card, or you can come over and talk to me too. You had something?
I've been coming to this New Living Expo since this whole century, and for me this year it was especially really difficult for me to get here to be here. And what I got was, I'm in the right place.
Ah.
I'm supposed to be, and I'm in my perfect soul zone.
That's great.
So that was like, I'm going, oh yeah, there's no place else except for my body to be except here.
Think about this. Planes take off against the wind. They move up. We always think, this goes back to that first thing, oh, we have our intuition and we're supposed to use it and it's going to tell us what to do. But one time, this rock came through the window, right? And I called my teacher and I said, I'm getting ready for this big ceremony years ago. And she's there, oh, you must be bringing in some potent medicine. And I'm there like, why? Because the rock went through the window? She's there. The bigger the teaching, the bigger the experience, the bigger the expression out is, the bigger the resistance. We've been taught to think, oh, if it doesn't come easy, it's not for me. Let me tell you, this took 10 years. I was up at 5 a.m. because I was working a full-time job, 5 to 7 every morning writing. We just think it's got to be easy, but the truth is no pain, no gain. And then you think, okay, now I got the book published by Hay House. Then the real work comes in. Then the real resistance. I had to get a clan of people. Remember, a plane takes off against the wind. If the wind is hitting you this way, it might mean that there's even more there for you. There's more in that separation. You're going to get better lessons. I do the podcast with Sandra Ingerman, and she said one time her spirit guide told her that she needed to live up at the end of the road, at top of the hill, and that people always needed to come see her in person for healing, because otherwise they didn't appreciate it. So we're in this age where you can Zoom and through Facebook and through YouTube, and the whole truth is that I had to have a dismemberment, stay in bed for 3 days, hike to the top of Peru and Chile, and I don't wish that for everyone else, but that was me taking off against the wind. So you are in the right place. It's so easy to go outside and wait for the wind to kiss your cheek. And then you know you're in the presence of grace. I don't know about you, I'm not a meditator, I'm a walker. And I can feel the wind when I walk. I want to show you something because, and this will be a great way to end this. Everyone stand up. Oh, but don't walk out after you're done standing up. Remember, when you were a child, you knew the wind. You'd go outside, you spread your arms. We call this a wind bath. A wind bath is when you stand and you close your eyes, feel the wind cleaning through you, and then without knocking somebody else over, take a little wind spin and feel the wind clearing you. Because I'll go to the beach and I'll go this way, and then I'll go that way, then I'll go that way, and then I'll go that way, and I'll do it until I feel clear. Free, simple, no coaching. That would be great to do with the kids too. All right, I'm going to do it, and everyone get a little wind bath here. Feel it go all the way up from your coccyx, all the way through your solar plexus, all the way up. Can you feel that? Do you remember that? One thing I know for sure, you will never, ever look, feel, taste the wind ever again after you've heard this lecture. So thank you very much for being here.